the security that only the U.S. possibly to provide the security that there's no stable balance of the power with their U.S. the different military, U.S. nation women, culture, U.S. agreements, and capacity to challenger, and relation to keeping effective OAS over regional challenges. Chapter 14, the U.S. is not able to agreement on rest from the Washington agreement, energy to win the government mobile support for the ways of body, the U.S. angel, more relation to push relationship ways when it comes to original and intention and reverent positive lot of the ways U.S. and common ground, and drop the legal agreement to be taken consideration the U.S. the more flexible pushing the relation of the ways of state, improving the bilateral relation of the subject of the original, the crucial given the nature of the responsible person have getting the hemisphere from the second of the drug market environment, OAS is a kind of efficient organization with experience and further generally critical challenges to the problem of political and regional and civil goals, nuclear coverage, and 13 countries in the 11 and has been rapidly exploded weaknesses in the U.S. security and civil from the option of major probably even the direct to the figure of receiving high level competition with great power. The conflict will lead to direct competition with nuclear power with the parts of the political and abuse and implementation, not from state proxy. Scenario 2 is Afghanistan plus also Afghanistan stability, Pegam 14, Afghanistan larger problem than Canada and the U.S. is larger support of the U.S. illegally Afghanistan companies up short of the income. This would stability, stability, the main benefit the illegal drug criminals will get married to legal groups of benefit the legal structure of the disappear and territorial government activity instability skills over cause a great part intervention in full pulse 127 Afghanistan German government Asia and Andrews for West and Central Asia with the nuclear coalition and present Afghan women important factor the industry they come to the exploitation of the rules of president from the civil government can mitigate in this of the Afghans in front of the security system and all of the European force effective and the assumption of the disability and gender movement of the large number of refugees to run the advice of attacks on the freedom social internal security problem like terrorism element of the regional global legal country is stable and potential is in a most of the drug cultivation called civil and Afghanistan received regional global stability license and encouragement of Afghanistan buffer center acting importance in river in fiction like sort of the partial indo-Pak was nuclear in WTA 14 into Pakistan's implement contention and different countries will lever the intention fighting and those strong political reaction of the approval or likely heavily the asking for the federal relation of the official leaders of Pakistan army deliberate attention draw attention to the question of the president of the nuclear coalition of the East Asia that has been across the Java Bank so the Central Asia blank to K many condition of the word particularly I think from the third countries and the central of the from the only field of delivers to the prospect of the command involved use of nuclear bomb as a region induced Russia leader of the nuclear weather with the nuclear bomb of the enter region of the Russian nuclear strategy with the age of the major like higher global city every Russell left from the president of the interest plan the US should legalize nearly all marijuana in the US and next advantage industry federation key investor certainty coming from 12 the problem is the sort of the backing over the issue of the marijuana agreement of the federal loan and 100% live in the alternative issue found out the multiple dollar interest in the hard to convince this business in the hard to get the hard to see legally hard to many countries relation to the particulars the federal pushing the business name covered that has required to the trade legal certainty uncertainty reason stability scenario one pharma statistical legalization undermines FDA credibility ND10 efforts to get legal certainty remember the value of the FDA the federal responsible the regulation control system of the FDA's approval should not be strict by the state nation of the considered federal government the search of the informed the citizen the group directly manner of the risk of the critical protection of the validation will also create an atmosphere of the advantages of political rather than setting the process of the one so federal government the most environmental the issue of the level of state level and that's key to pharma lamina 14 and the strong FDA's crucial from the system of the virtual argument the critical from the state of the patient physically control the credibility of pharma industry is directly connected with the FDA the strong the pharmacy functionally equivalent the reputation that on that self-scientific leadership FDA 9 all the way collaboration cannabis dispensary with the logic of the FDA should be dispersed from the country for the location of the second the collaboration dispensary with the common opposite kind FTCA and this is working from the regulatory very extinction federal a US leaders sentiment tool software between the partners from the strength they built and the SAG based on the global common sense and common knowledge able to bridge control open lines of the communication cooperatively federal and international from the competence and combination to energy water should develop public and the government the condition property producing the ability to specific use collaboration of biological control and nuclear with the from the base scientific practices of our bubbles will burst and this in 2019 it is by to global issue of the birth and the big process serving the size of the second nation war debates and reason of the foreign clinical valley new drugs, bringing new drugs when they bring it down the more expensive keepers when they become the hard when they're promising those substance years of investment has been paid on the R&D project and has been declining and legalization solves the industry assignment towards 15 research when the investor bullish by the financial problem of the cannabis drug and from the abuse purpose that this industry is real once legalist member of the $13 billion engine and the safety of the cannabis platform also the does where financial return will legalize the industry show promise for private company and negative comes with regulatory from the cultivation handling cannabis if there's FDA approval the product will be real investment will be more plenty they will be more likely because of the regulatory properly investing mitigating the absent FDA approval maybe because of convention the industry they need to discuss the as Apple school and that's key to the economy so limited level that farm economy job future economy the weather sector the village job emission free jobs from the industry job supported jobs in other sector the pharmacy gears and the importance of economy with after the from the economy from the extra the boost the business economy the effective and the productivity to be improved the gears also the big low because because economic sector extinction premium 14 a global economic movement the previous active on the full lesson version of the Europe is improved by antagonist Ukraine US and Russia with the militant hostile China or dagger from the American relations to diplomacy and nuclear and allocation plans over superbug 14 in the wind and already left the problem in the drug resistant right going to New Zealand the person the Georgia government must be an outbreak or such a also based on the recent basic the cannabis alleged identity point and advice with the strong data project for the pleasure to has been the the Indo-Body community so that the use of the discovery extinction of Canada and 14 extinction of the discovery that scientists from the virus discovery the dead disease age 5 exhibit the common infection proven that accommodating according to report the vaccine that become the smart health official of the world the consequence of human dying and a high rate of use of the terms of the death of agriculture senior to agriculture legalization unlike new ag potential bagger 14 maybe and the business world etc they simply use kind of the application industry they see see big benefit of medicine and harvest part of the immense problem that many companies have now, as well as the touch of capital wireless real remains all agricultural food production could be one of the benefits of improving cultivation, indoor farming, the risk of the nature of the abandonning insects as a farmer may be able to bear the cultivate grow hydroponically dry condition of the climate change and agriculture blue, but being production indoors may be due to place global food shortage is inevitable. New production is key burgers. I love it to be a world most interest food production. There's the risk of serious shortage for the green social unacceptable. Whereas given the worst of the world system, less agriculture production, worse even the whole might be effective in the climate change, worsening flood, droughts, costly addition to present the access shortage, cost nuclear war, FDI 12 of the conflict will be about to resume the German war, which we ever encountered that needs to be invasive and people often going to see the sounds of the blood rush or policy. I testify fairness to where nuclear war rewriting a federal law by Congress is necessary for international law. The Guardian 14 until DC first fails to the limitation which was not going to real drug policy is living, meaning to travel the federal government campus, which will advancement to the DC rules laws of the alternative to think of the conditions so when the Congress to do straight from regular federal so that we might open on the other side a little future can determine that back to law on the books chill see industry development is the fire show pushing law is still on the books when there's a reason why there's substance illegal repeating law elements to involve the condition. Many states are unwilling to make separate claims. The federal government between the state and the commission justice to guide us with the prosecuting over the face. If the state efforts to not represent shaky foundation of the two sheets of policy and each one the next administration and the federal and reforms on any good federal action. Yeah.
I lied. No card.
Aww.
Okay. Latin American relations. That was part of the OAC says, quote, one can debate whether senior U.S. officials visit Latin America frequently enough. The Caribbean faces a set of important challenges such as transnational crime, governance, developmental issues, and the post-World War. Policymakers seldom think it is strategic to look at Latin America. The bottom of the card says the problem in Washington, D.C. is too few of them consider the strategic dimensions of Latin America. What about the plan makes it so that U.S. policymakers actually work with Latin America?
Did not read the part of the Hakim evidence which says that the drug issues will be the center stage and the top of the document of OAS.
No, I get that. Which part says the U.S. will actually go?
What?
Which part says like the U.S. will go or
The
offer
OAS
strategic
looks like
issues
a
over
paper
here?
tiger trying to propose legalization in the region. They look like a puppet of the U.S. and we don't back them up. They have no credibility as an institution.
No, I
we
get that.
shore up our
Yeah,
ability to
but-
focus
but
on Latin
policies-
America as a
but-
valuable
wait,
strategic
no,
partner.
that's not the question. The question is, what do we do with Latin America
I
as a strategic partner if Washington
You've
doesn't
read
care about it?
extremely good aft parts of the card that indicate the current relationship is tenuous. We do not focus on Latin America. The plan radically changes that by using the OAS as an institution to reform legalization.
And then I also inserted the alt cost
Afghanistan
with the
scenario?
OAS considering drug issue as like the central theme of their meeting.
Afghanistan scenario, if the U.S. could just grow its own weed, why would we buy from Afghanistan?
What?
Why would we buy from Afghanistan in a world that
I mean, your
it is legal to produce
assumption
weed?
that U.S. supply could alone meet the demand, I think it's wrong. Our
Okay, what about like U.S.,
legalization-
Canada, Mexico, and all the countries that are closer to the United States than Afghanistan? Where does this card say like they outcompete
This
every
evidence
country that is
indicates
net
Afghanistan
closer?
is the largest provider of cannabis, and the U.S. is the largest consumer. So in the scope
Right, they're the ones who already have a
Regulations goes to legalization.
I mean, there could be a bunch of different regulation. I don't think that one is necessarily stands,
Okay.
but one example would
That's-
be like, age restriction, regulation on like
Who
where
decides?
you
Who
grow.
decides what those are?
I don't know.
Like if the federal government was like, we really hate
I would
marijuana
likely
legalization.
presume there is some federal agency that is designated to decide.
let's ask
I'm
a
really
hypothetical.
just saying maybe. We
Let's
don't
ask a
have to take a
hypothetical.
stance on
If
the
we read a
regulation.
card that says something like, the federal government really wants marijuana to be illegal, why wouldn't that just mean that they would regulate every portion of marijuana and make it
I
functionally
think
illegal?
that doesn't make any sense because fiat means that we will defend legalization with some form of regulation, but we don't
Okay,
think that app
how
must
extensive
defend
is that?
a particular.
Okay, no. Here's my real question.
Legalization
Can
by
your
definition must require removal of the prohibition and regulation. The app does, we don't think the app
Okay.
should take a stance on
Can,
what kind of regulation.
can your regulation be, it can only be smoking weed if you were standing in the
That
direct
could be
spot
one
that I
example
am
of
right
the
now?
regulation. Again, like all of these regulation counterpoint that you could come up with, we don't think it's competitive because that doesn't have this.
Your
Okay,
example
if
is
these-
the example of the dumbest counterpoint on this topic where I'm not standing now, take out of that and read it at that. That's exactly why we are having this.
Okay, I actually have a question about that. If laws on the books control the industry, like your last piece of evidence suggests, then why can't just random regulations control the industry? Why can't it just be
Well,
like,
where
if the
does
federal
random
government,
regulation-
you just said the federal government can do whatever they want to regulate it, and so can municipalities and states. If that is true, and they want it to be illegal, ask about politics,
I
makes
mean,
me worried.
the
Why don't they just
reason
make
why
it
we don't
illegal
take a
everywhere?
stand is because we don't think that you should get uncompetitive counterpoints. Obviously, we still need to make a solvency argument as to why regulations.
Where you stand?
Oh. You sent it out yet?
Yes. Did I only respond to him? No? What
No,
did-
I
got it.
Perfect.
Pretty efficient.
Was I not from the original email?
I can check with him.
That is true.
I haven't. Okay.
You are not
So
in
I'm
Yeah, you
not-
are.
Let me,
Not bad.
I'm gonna send it again just so we can be on the thread if that's okay with everyone. Okay. You should have, wait, I didn't send. That was great. I sent it without the attachment. I'll do it to you one more time. I'm so sorry.
Huh. I love round places.
Oh wow, there are a lot of people on this phone.
No, we are getting also like in the decent chance of something in our garden, so.
What? Is that everyone?
What this is?
Did it end up sending it through or?
No, I accidentally
Oh,
sent it
gotcha.
without the attachment, so I'm forwarding it,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to add everyone back in.
I feel
I
extra.
think this is everyone.
Yeah.
If not, I am so sorry, and we'll fix that if user rate.
It's the case over again.
Just the first advantage, just one advantage.
Just for you guys.
I'll let you know, like, here's taking sweet time.
No problem.
I got it.
Okay. Is everybody ready? Perfect. The affirmative must specify the regulation and age of vote negative A. It's impossible to evaluate the cost and benefits of the distance or counterfeit may be is. Excuse the legalization debate because there's no class not about what the topics are climbing. In 13, debate whether the legalization point is policy is important. Debate about how the results of the legalization depend on the details of the tax and regulatory machines. Everything has advantages and disadvantages. The plurals maybe both sides and spending a lot of time denying the opposite neither. Cannabis nor legalization needs to obviously with specificity lawful things for legalization. Next off is the THTB declines coming voting. Is there happening in early April in Obama capital with Democrats federal any delay kills TTP financial review in 329 Obama Congress telling the strength the deal domestic partnership deters countries are expecting committees to release the legislation sooner for HTTP is vital to give TPP countries confidence in the administration senior Democratic ASICs would depend on the administration really ramping up the case of force for the members in April scripture that the plan would appeal Obama's capital jaw in 12 the public department may bitterly divisive the politician would become a saddle because the labels board and a long dynamics with rapidly the radio leader struggle look and given Obama susceptible to racial stereotypes feeling to relax marijuana laws will cost the president TPP is key to Asia pivot self sensibility Miller and Yo and for the TPP the pivot of Asia military support of the reposition of relative equipment is a political and economic real life will improve cooperation economic capital depend on the exports of the consumer base for Asia the TPP is a key ingredient even in relationship with rising powers engagement with institution expanding trade of the tensions among Asia's power the U.S. is a single entity that can influence the situation many are concerned with the paper with superficial TPP will reassure partners now South China Sea wars coming the status quo the U.S. will get drawn into miscalculations like the Denmark in 14 the previous year these species not promised and other scientists demonstrate the compromise of the potential feature for crisis high Beijing appears to have escalation a tool to be used for predictability escalation is a dangerous tool intention can always fire out of control should China use the force against the buildings the U.S. will be drawn into a crisis the U.S. will be unlikely to back down the credibility of America's already on the question after Ukraine the U.S. is the major interest in seeing peace and isolation hands deters by strengthening military cooperation with other claimants China and other claimants the SCC around the coalition of course in this coming the U.S. has demonstrated leadership by first holding the crisis to be throwing the entire region of conflict less claims to away from aggression it's only a matter of time until Beijing miscalculates and escalates this is how Sarah said that escalates into a nuclear since Goldstein in 13 inches will be staying behind the other thing decide the risk of escalation was worth running stakes but behind enough to initiate a military action to elevate the risk to a disastrous outcome statements about the speech of South China Sea suggests both sides value this region the most worrisome source of instability generates the risk of nuclear catastrophe next off is the counterplay tax the United States should remove legal prohibition on the distribution dispensation and possession of marijuana the United States should eliminate legal prohibition on the importation of marijuana the United States should end it in an international push for global prohibition of marijuana the United States should end ballot initiatives that violate FDA rules no counterplan competes the appetite production sale and possession calculus and all 12 legalization concerned whether to change the laws make illegal to produce sale and possess marijuana next off is the DISAC Canada's economy is recovering the plane collapses the marijuana exports of the U.S. employ 1 out of 14 adults in Canada had no 10 the Canadian economy avoided double the recession. There has been emerged an immediate threat of crisis. Legalized marijuana be devastating the Canadian economy, halting billions of dollars and forcing hundreds of thousands of unemployment. Canada, the highly profitable marijuana industry that completely dependent on the U.S. 90% of marijuana is exported to the U.S. Illegal industry in the U.S. will cripple exports overnight. Industries and economies estimated $20 billion per year and making economies the largest private employees. One of 14 endorse marijuana production insults to communities from economic phenomenon after Nelson was able to transition into a threatened common use of marijuana in Canada would be a far worse marijuana cultivation had building employment back in the current system only works to exist in contrast to American prohibition now causes. Quebec to succeed, the economy is a rallying point. RT News and 12 Quebec separatist party is expecting a comeback to this economic conservative. The separatist party has been popular with Quebec separation to surface separatist claim. The economy is a referendum to be held if there was a common equitably. The economic conservative continues. The calls for Quebec sovereignty and the Quebec people would have their Quebecers ask for greater economic development. Many refuse will be the reason Quebec we temper the public demand for a referendum. Quebec is growing estranged from Canada now extinction because it'll cause civil wars, diversionary wars with China and Russia and Iran and splits. NATO Maxine 14. If Quebec were to succeed, Canada would go to war with the province of China or Russia. Quebec would spark a civil war in Quebec reverses contributed to the American economy. Independent Quebec would change the Quebec. Separatists use violence to be easier for Quebec to buy arms. The civil war would split up NATO as France and support of Quebec. The U.S. would be deeply intertwined in the Russian China American use the war to press the Western alliance that could support Quebec under the rebels to provide a foothold with hostile states who threaten the U.S. Next off is ergo to the advantage. The U.S. What? The plan causes overregulation to solve the vote negative presumption. You can probably focus on this. Drug 14. Resistance to legal marijuana is rising. House country was illegal marijuana sales. The active fuel by the retail stores develop illegal opinions about it will be larger. And over the future, marijuana growing conservative communities resistance over backers and the public are relaxing the drug and providing themselves alive with democratic skeptics. The best thing would be having the anti-legalization and legalization. They're helping predicting a backlash from pockets of retirements of emerging the states and lawmakers are considering allowing municipalities to restrict or prohibit marijuana.
Wait,
Oh my. Emerging opposition to illegal towns and restrict the higher legalization of communities are claiming that they believe right to ban sellers and north and deeper entry drug opposition to be exacted the ways of rapid attention. Now the advantage. Cuba, U.S. normalization solved U.S. relation, OAS cohesion, regional splitting, extra Dula. In 1219, the U.S. Cuban relations have streams for liberation and entire free announcements were welcomed across Latin America. The embargo, Frank Fanders have been distorted. Regional relation for the entire normalization and for the entire country. Cuba will return to full membership in the OAS and Venezuela. Cuba pressure and peaceful stream improved. The must be key now. America won't use LA relations for the alternative causes or LA. LA7 will threaten the cross. There's no Latin American escalation. Cardenas and Lovins up here. The Mexican drug violence and spill over Latin America with little and no threat to the international peace. No countries in possession of nuclear weapons, nor has to express any interest. Latin American countries do not have a chance to confront a worse ethnic and religious conflict for very uncommon. The Japanese scenario, all causes of military and the dollar preserve any prevalence or evidence also says is high now in the military scheme between they don't eventually doesn't. Silverware, Montiero, 12 logo, power pepper on the last of the uniform demand conflict over this is not meant to apply to relation between major and minor power players. The most conflict prone of all of this is remarkable. 59% of the years we spent in ordering a multiplayer. The probability of the war breakout was 4.2% of the unipolarity. 18.2% of these figures provide no evidence. Unipolarity is peaceful soft power and diplomacy also don't solve. The U.S. won't use it effectively. Walled in 14. The watching music here remind me of unlimited and serious America's approach to foreign affairs. The real top jobs are handled by partisan pointing problems have gone off. The reals we're afraid that diplomats will go naive. Will encourage them to develop regional expertise and rotate them around the globe. And its creative primaries electoral who have said in the debate over the discourse of the country all distract more than 25% of we spend only 2.2% of the GDP in this area, which tells you the real priority of America's place on non-military tools of international influence. We're trying to be the indispensable power of the but the results speak for themselves. Now multilateralism also fails because structural states support and allow the strategic environment of the post-Cold War era cases structural concerns of the president to pursue the multilateral foreign policy. The absence of a shared great power that is undermined the institution of working through the U.S. and allies set the end of the Cold War is undermined the president to ability to power veto players whose interests are governed by multilateral commitments. Or you want me to skip this? Afghanistan. The drug revenues causing Afghanistan instability now causes the plan causes instability. Ferry in 521. Opium will place a lot of people think that Afghanistan but acting worse without it to help keep it able to join. And such the alternative right now would be a huge political stability. There's no legal economy to match. The problem with opium is problem with Afghans will grow. They will employ 20% of the people currently working in the opium field. Afghanistan brings 7% of the world. Heroin supply growing opium makes more than 50% of Afghanistan GDP. Local warlords and development and Alabama more on their hands to trade the Indo-Pakistan scenario. Newest resolutions offensively are actually. There's no impact war because of deterrence JoJo and all intent deterrence enhanced building impact of multiple comments for effective nuclear deterrence. No nuclear war takes place nuclear war than avoided nuclear deterrence is thus successful and can building economics to and Ellis and two the same thing race and potential for competition between both countries remains strong and with constraints of the Pakistani and Islamabad cannot acquiesce to the resources of the Indian and the constraints are more self-imposed. The street capabilities will increase slowly. Second advantage. Drugs collapse the industry means neglected diseases are more prevalent than drug and all 14 changes the price and quantity resulting from patterns of depression by RB the pharmaceutical the implementation of terms of makes concerning dynamic effects particularly in developing will find little change of R&D expenditures and neglected disease such as malaria and river blindness have had a higher prevalence in poor countries. This could be the result of a poorly functioning patent system little providing something for necessary innovation and neglected disease will cause a state failure hodents intent the people in high risk of NTDs of the areas of greatest concern global security live in the pockets of poverty including hold nuclear weapons Starfield India Pakistan China Iran North Korea people are trapped in conflict at NDT as well throughout the nuclear states where they can promote global security by increasing poverty and possible radicalization. I'm going to skip the next verse. That's okay, right? Science literature. There's no impact we can't use to defect Willie Marlowe. In 12 cents, the diplomatic tool to construct a brand of international relations, talented follow through on initiative predicated on personal, credibility, direct individual envoys, leveraging the networks of world-renowned science within the framework of a coherent policy of international relations, difficult particularly when funding is uncertain. The econ scenario, there's no internal link. It's about global pharma, which is their sole and efforts. International economy is resilient. Dreisner, in 14, the global economies are bounded with power to global efforts successfully coordinated efforts to lead the worst effects of multilateral institutions, adjusted for governments to reflect distribution of power, contradict expectations. Global governments prevent the crisis from metastasizing into depression. The disease scenario is asinine. There's no mutation of burnout. Checks it from happening live in 13. Disease faces the choice between spreading bees. If you're thinking these skills quickly, they can't spread if it's easy. The host, it doesn't much matter. In 19 influenza death rate was only 2%. Had it been a death rate about 100%, the flu would have been stopped quicker. The world knows disease is coming. The faster risk can be mobilized and behavior can be stopped to change the food war scenario. It's a myth. There's zero empirical evidence. Thailand. In 7, there's little systematic empirical evidence. The resource scarce leads to comic studies show that abundant resources is more likely to contribute to comic 5 million people rely on food choices, but yet who experienced the war there was much more than conflict rather than scarcity. They're all causes of Ebola. AP and 16 Ebola is disrupting the flows of goods for up to 1 million people. The worst outbreak ever. Ebola is increasingly impacting food supply. Several markets have made shut down the price of rice, and other states are soaring. Farmers in some areas have been cut off of the fields, and fear and convenience is disrupting supplies within a health crisis, so it impacted food security. That's good.
In what condition can you keep the counterplan?
Condition, that's condition.
Individual planes.
No.
The only net benefit to the counterplan, I assume, is in Canada.
Yeah, if you make solvency deficits, we can concede that and go for the corresponding impact on obviously.
Okay, sure.
So maybe Afghanistan.
TPA, I have a question. Your uniqueness evidence says that it would be important that Obama exert political capital. What part of this financial review evidence do you think it makes a claim that PC will be successful?
I think it's made an argument as to why it's been successful with convincing people like the Republicans who said they've been on
Yeah,
board.
it says,
They're
and then it says
necessary
we need
that-
40 to 50 House Democrats, and it says it's going to depend on the
It says
administration
it
ramping up
depends
the
on the
pressure,
administration
and
ramping
the
up
cars
the
ends.
Which seems to indicate that people in the Democratic Party are
Sure.
saying if Obama
Asia
continues
pivot,
to provide
your
pressure
Hitler
on the
evidence,
process.
your Denmark evidence and Goldstein evidence about how like deterrence being important. Why doesn't U.S. having presence in the region, even absence of our trade relationship, check conflict?
I
and
think the
escalation?
internal link to Asia pivot is really good if you look at the Miller evidence.
I know this says like perception is important, but like structurally, what incentive does China have in like lashing out against China when we have our military?
Yeah, actually, the
Korea,
Goldstein
we have a military
evidence
presence.
speaks to that. It says that they perceive their interest in the region as being of enough significance to them that they would go to war. And it says that they probably wouldn't start with a nuclear war, but it would likely escalate that because they start non-conventional or like military conflict with just like naval forces, that sort of stuff,
Sure.
and then we would escalate.
Sure.
That's the
Then I have a question about the counterplan. So the counterplan says we should end its international push, or not that part. We should eliminate legal prohibition on the importation of the marijuana. I'm correct that you do not put any restriction of what kind of countries that we import marijuana, right?
We think we should be able to import marijuana from other countries.
Sure. And so then why, if your thesis, like in the 1AC process, your partner talked about like how there are like other marijuana that could also come. If you want the thesis of our Afghanistan advantage, like why doesn't Afghanistan also drive out Canadian market?
Well,
Or
first of all,
NSS.
we've cited trends that say 90% of imports come from Canada. There's no reason why we would switch that unless you read evidence that indicates we would, which I
Yeah,
get.
but
Second of all,
but the counterplay ends international importation of, allow for international importation of marijuana. Why doesn't other
there's no
markets?
reason we would switch a market. I think the Haddo evidence also is really good. It says consumers like BC Bud, which is what they call the Canadian.
Sure.
Canadian
So
wine.
your Haddo
So they would
evidence, the
probably
last
do
part
that
that you
which
did
is
not
the trend.
highlight says if Californians vote to legalize, the only way for Canada to avoid taking massive economic hit would be to follow the suit. If we win the thesis of our drug war advantage,
Well,
why
that
doesn't
says
Canada
that
model
legalizing on a
legalization?
national level would be more problematic.
Sorry, I think that's stating that they've already made those legalization laws also. That goes from
What?
2010. That goes from 2010. There's been a lot of new legalization measures that have happened in
Legalization measures
And they are
where?
in Canada.
In Canada.
Yeah, which is
The
But
suit
this
that
part-
you're talking about has already come.
Then why do they need to rely on like illegal export to United States when they can have domestic
I don't know.
Canadian legal economy? So your internal link to economy is based on the fact that like British Columbia could export their illegal weed to the United States. If they have legal economy, why would they depend on export?
card is so good.
Yeah, but
it says
you
it
didn't
employs one
highlight
out
the
of
last
every
part of the
14
card.
adults. You don't mind highlighting it out.
What's up?
Putting up too much of a fan.
What's up, microphone? Done. Yeah, that was my impression. Yeah, no problem.
7:20 left. Does that sound right?
Yep. Yeah.
I think home advantage 1 and 2. It's like a concerned face.
I'll go grab some water while that happens.
It'll probably be fast. Don't waste time. They're fine. We'll get it later.
Barely saved in the first place.
What's it doing?
It is trying to catch the email, but is
Round one. We did What's the last time I saw that? A good sleep.
Wait, really? You got the camera from your first count in front of you ever? We have gone in front of all of them. Nice. She's really broke into it. I've never been prouder.
You should have read it.
Stop it. And now we get to talk about Canada. So much more.
just pressing send. Well, holy shit. Send.
Nice.
So does that actually
Oh my god, you not included in the chat. I can forward it.
That's.
Stay out.
I feel like we just need to keep
I understand all that. Let's bring back the other thing.
No, well, in the meantime, war on drugs. Yeah.
I have to back out four rounds of bread.
War on drugs. Is everybody ready for the order?
Yes.
War on drugs, industry, spec, imports, Canada, TPA. Make sure you guys know which there's build up.
Do you want a real timer?
Yes, Ellis, Mr. Great Power, intervention, China and Iran are all intervening, so thing the power, it happens power projection, yes, they kill us, China, syndicates, we get up power projection internationally because they're in our backyard, which otherwise our economic, international hegemony, ways than anywhere that indicates the key to global security turns us all as preventing spheres of influence that are happening internationally intervene in Latin America, intervene within Latin America, our defenses entirely irrelevant, our arguments that we cannot effectively militarily power ourselves. Good blood means China cannot be able to effectively intervene within the region now. The Afghanistan scenario plan over and drugs are horrible for the Afghan economy. Constant corruption. All of these are fostered by a legal economy that one of the people to solve the current 37 does not assume terrorism or instability from 126 this way. More recent indicates Afghanistan cascades causes instability. Evidence indicates diplomacy is insufficient. Defense, the economy is also insufficient to check because it undermines global civil or economic stability within the region, specifically now the industry. It's the plan resolved specifically or actually can see impact of disease undermine the argument no impact to the internal we are massive internal solving science diplomacy ERP that absent form we cannot power project medical diplomacy internationally yet all cooperation cooperation on transnational interests is another tangible of the a soft power sample, yes, internal to the global economy or P7 does not in the collapse of pharmaceuticals, which means exports, jobs, and revenue are massive without absence of pharma causes conflict reference to 2014 indicates global hotspots. Tinderbox in the status code be able to controlling to food. Your evidence is not assumed to collapse in the collateral food coming from climate change as well as droughts that are coming successful technology, lighting or hydroponics or sufficient salt conflict over 2 years. This is what World War II empirical is now the specification. Solve negative guarantee to legal response substantive credit no solvency argument plan is only sufficient and so as they solve the plan this will be further specified as well. flexible permutation. Both can solve any for war and drugs and issue. To have the U.S. maneuver legal prohibition, which are piece of evidence the bottom line seeing the CSA is key to modeling from other countries. The passes the Harmonic model, the collapses the war, drugs specifically the LA scenario identifies a lapse between the federal and state approval of the federal levels are peaceful. That's sufficient to solve all the industry scenario. You cannot solve any of all production that's when pig out of obviously you cannot solve that are all production based. You leave the underground market policy within the framework of prohibition, legal, unregulated market decriminalization, nothing to limit the underground one on this organization to percent access needs to be relevant if the law must be to be unspoken practice that by efforts to hire hackers who are legal in the federal law or rules of the private government laws are seeing the freedom would not apply to the joint public administration if it was a information security works makes that causes nuclear war to control the cyber attack they control communications goes on for a few hours later the Australian cyber attack was seen this national war full scale response to the Canada said non-unique and massive causes quit your drops and going exports and cases if Columbia trace was near the big African markets the treasuries came to a model US legal zero probably have little choice but the policy and production is key to US Canadian relations manufacturers had to figure out its legal federal laws and teachers under become legal financial Canadian cuts price for the enemy of having the insert cross-border corporation jump to the industry would have an economic argument frame issues being managed trade access for Canada the import of Canada's financial inevitable housing hold price market did not erupted for US markets the Bank of Canada suggests the housing prices were over 5% of items rated warming lower the oil the job creation putting Canada forward now for self-order drew workers to be able to have national consumer confidence Quebec secessionism back in 14 Quebec workers they have making 30 and they would be able to take notes to not sure to collect payments for the understand participant with the transaction pursuing and extraction steps for global section has concessions from Quebec we have immigration small portions of Quebecers making on the Quebec has improved secession model to the trick question of independence has never been on issue Shimony will be able to dampen and contain any conflict global secession as they do whenever Israel's interest would be able to contain on politics as will pass and PC later and unfortunately the White House has failed launching for lobbying Canadian for the law finding against has damaged to be able to make the DPP argument the investment chapter for companies to be able to the use of funds to quickly take advantage of control context from Republicans criticize the extrajudicial tribunal will be countered back into TPP majority Republicans Democrats finding to be a political important facing prospect losing the lawmakers and able to pass Democratic lawmakers be able to pass in effect longer Schwab be able to supporting the bill from McConnell's reiterated chapter 3 voting on chamber outcome for the round proposal to connect with local capital reaching the nuclear deal with Ron Homer's anchoring evermore tone the line of plan results in 14 it's increased pressure on the for consistent measure for Democrats and Republicans increasing the ability for better policies for one lobby plan to solve if you can one lobby or super PAC business needed to protect the strong nuclear force of lawmakers benefit from political diminution and friendly executive actions for different keep up if it fails to live leave takes Americans been backing up for the military has been some for sequestration being able to support referees Ukraine ISIS military December of the police return for U.S. military and TPA does not spill over to TPP. Levy and 14 of TPA have the authority for successfully to speak as most harsh for governors and the DSO's regulations to divide the U.S. into TPA ordinance with no less than each unit from or passed. Presidential hack employed comparable for Carter and Johnson Administration Deck research found the structural forces most compelling explanation on research compares success and personality relationship and institutional mix President's role as leadership taking Washington generation scholarship. Sure. Question legalization, capital, well, maybe leave the war. Drugs affect priority, let's make any changes, whiskey's not going to even get to bother. Canada said. U.S. industry falls into the Canadian currency exports the Canadian is good for their border and global model for secession becoming 2,000 members of government have determination self-principle for digital principles that are locally parallel as the minorities in addition to population firmly accept for him as for historic justified that this minorities for the strong evidence of current political distinction of slippery slope of concepts that leads to secessionism growing in 2000 fewer of economies slippery slope none of the factors that for your and ethics have to factor for the non absence of negotiation of negotiation because no secession is self-determination not being fulfilled by the secessionists because an internal democratic process of political and self-development gives them space to the most proposed for the majority. Go back to the imports counterpoint. The FTA plank does not solve pharmaceuticals. They solve credibility, but do not create an industry for based off weed, which means there's no industrial development to solve any or
Yeah, 2 minutes 20. Wait. They're good. I'll rate it. Yeah. Yeah.
Where are those two AC cards?
They can them out.
I haven't gotten them. Can I take a top scout one?
Computer.
I've received it. Tracy.
I received it. Am I on that email?
Oh,
You're CC'd.
This was crazy.
Then
Stop, Trev. Readers talking.
Good. Cool. Palmer evidence the one about the intro into the pharmacy said that marijuana is a special case because it is the most, or excuse me, the first narrative says marijuana is the most consumed, which is the reason why it tracks OAS efforts away from things like, you know, regional security. The counter is consumed. Why wouldn't those four people transition to Latin America?
Your only portion that you think resolves that like decrim part, like U.S. no longer enforces the Palmer and Keem evidence.
Wait, no.
The,
We
the
legalize
Keem
consumption. You cannot like prove no not make marijuana, which is what your Palmer internal link says is the reason
The Keem
because it is
evidence,
the
which
most
I was
consumed
giving
drug.
to indicates the state has a patchwork of laws and it's still illegal to the federal government. So those countries that we're modeling, because it's a modeling scenario, not just related to LA follows on, they don't model any of those. The bottom card of the 1AC only one congressional removal
Sure,
of
what
the
card
law.
do you think?
Or like the second to last card of these types of counterplans that don't remove
It
from
also
the
said
CSA
it was looking at all the
indicate war on
approaches
drugs.
and then says that there are other types of words that it said.
Hakeem,
That's fine.
that's
okay.
illegal under the
I can
federal
still hear
government.
you talking
And
and
then
not
bottom
answer
card of the
anymore.
federal
The
government.
Pagan evidence says if it utilizes could supply us, which is the only warrant in the internal link to the Afghanistan scenario, I think I can resolve that.
What do you mean?
You made an argument that's like doesn't solve Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Your internal
Our is make
like
certain evidence at the bottom of the one
More
C indicates
advantage
DEA rate all
almost
the
done with it. That's what your internal link says that we need drug innovation. A pharmaceutical company buys from Canada and then does innovation using that
Like
research and makes money. Why not resolve the farm?
The CSA regulations without standardization of pharma means that it could never effectively develop because they're always scared about being raided or attacked. You take out of production or
Right, we
consumption
utilize
shit and
the
all local stuff.
importation and the
That is
use of
definition you could have got out of excuse me?
Disagree. There's
I'm
seen
going to
evidence
keep
for the
repeating you. The counterplan does not repeal the CSA. It is tangential
I agree.
to every one of these
There's seen
scenarios.
evidence for the cyber add-on is about employees smoke weed.
About because CSA has an addition of an employment policy that indicates that they will never hire them because it's illegal under federal law and repeal the CSA. They are allowed to do that. The counterplan does not move from the CSA.
Canada won't, or Quebec won't sustain
from this month, from your like joke 2012 Quebec secessionism evidence.
Can I just ask
there's no
more about that? Is there a that card besides because Canada pays Quebec to be part of the union?
Sure. Well, the one piece of evidence from the perspective of the
Are you taking prep?
I'm just
Okay.
You have to make sure the file is saved or it'll save real life. Try it again. What? Yeah.
That's fair. The order is Canada idea, the spec argument, then war on drugs business.
What?
War on drugs. Canada, spec, war on drugs.
Got it. Struggle bus.
multiple strategic economic ties with the US, they ensure they get through is proxy war, China, Russia, and rapidly war with Quebec, and they say that we use Quebec's proxy to attack against the United States, controlling to all the hegemony arguments that they are going for, and destroys the exact same reason they would have been third is NATO class, NATO ties with Canadian intervention is legally binding, but and term fights me that there is uncertainty the cause of the conflict. They have seen it that England and France will fight over literally split in half the alliance because they will be ineffective. That is able to track back all the war arguments that they are going from a collapse of NATO base. Section 7 will open in NDT has been temporarily edging. Nuclear unstable Russia in the game there are potential wars looking at them to be what to be everything Europe there. But because the NATO nation wants to fight on NATO is here. These events they know where to do so. But by the chaos I'm not reading where in backwards succeeded that is fundamentally inevitable that nuclear war isolation happens when when the how do evidence indicates that we is keeping up with today as a backstop against the recession. You can see that whenever jobs are lost, they go to the view as rankings elements new shot can kill that shooter and through the economy go faster than a second variation and the fourth surface the more is enough to keep the economy accounts are people are the Canadian economy coming the aggressive team we're spending is keeping the economy up but well maybe Canada's GDP expected to be next argument that they have is legalization in Canada. Next argument they have had is to go to other places. Arguments that are importing the majority from Canada. The status quo, they see the one in CF and the that's where all the way in California and northern states are able to solve the Canada profit evaporates. They're the one giving to a status person and 14 has the system for legalization in Canadian oil and majority is zero kills Canadian profitability job knowledge and for community drugs well being criminologist looking the party down the profitable is going to recall picture of the marijuana has following relations I have no idea what this has to do fundamentally inevitable from the 1 and 2 which is the reason it throws in no one's worth that so I don't think it is relevant do not undo one arrow because that's the reason I'm recording on it and he says well also geography and so that means that we're going to work together they say the economy the other word that this card has is oil which is that's the Canadian economy will grow despite a fall oil the economy will grow in the year in Canada and the government will bounce out of the something that they have the only word their evidence is that because Canada off and lose that ability when their economy process is being driven by basically the sex which are all conceded warrants from the 1C which is the reason you should not allow them to do the only reason I have to see that is because of the money that's they're receiving. Go back and lower became the English is involved into the way that was connected with hand. The English is trade, there was a required revolution, sat the element of the terrorism and the well, different division within the service of officials and translated to the first three linguistic antagonism for the Oscars that context will backtrack seal like the community part of the whole who voted against it because they were economic remaining in Canada not because of some type of loyalty and collapse the economy means they definitely secede. Pretending to be the leadership representative of the government and this parody of some people have to stand up by we're sending companies always history present in 96 a possibility can ever consider the Canadian economy and taking about the use of the system they say yours in the economy is doesn't make any sense because they can see that we would give that Canada would give export things because the only product that they have is export only says code it's like they're like crowd and those industrial all the people said it because the economy of Japan which is where Canada is US dependent on Canada where around there through the US economy talking about the most important time to be the number one supplier of the energy Canada is the US may not be able to around this. Oh, I already got it. Cool. Next argument they have is that other countries will model relevant, not the impact that we're going for. Last argument they have is that it is illegal. Obviously, that's why it causes a large civil war. Our evidence indicates that they still have secessionist rallies all the time and they still try to do it. Our evidence is just better than they're giving credit for.
is able to majority of the officers young for others leading new shifts in the U.S. also shows that we have heard about the globalization and we have back there outlays going on in Latin America, or the agency the argument that indicates the U.S. will never focus there. The else evidence that they indicates Congress will never work those workers. Congressmen don't care. We're not willing to ask. That was not something that is only on the agenda. We just now insert the card that I read in the concept of the debate. So this talk, there's no Latin America in it. It's a way. It's not like we get escalated because there is nuclear weapons. It would be very bad for them. And that disability that's LM 109, the further complexes of the applicant independence and the mediation, the regional power needs to gain from the escalation, the retaliation, the amnesty between the countries and the military, mean that there is very low will deterrent against the whole domestic economic wholesale, the improvement of jobs and the resources from the military conflict, Brazil, the it's level either way, which was that this is the way so 9 is or 20 who did pass the bring down the saving of the government inequality that fact change I think the higher political ability now the OS argument are not unique because it feels that you will work for it anyway. That's AP and 13 they always been formidable and there's been a rating graph of the which is able to inevitably NATO alliances means that we are inevitably able to turn Russia. It also proves that Germany that they have won't work because multilateralism and power always fails, which is one and number because when they disagree, they will just go around us or find shortcomings. At worst, they just say we don't care about what the United States says because they cannot enforce it, and that would be military or the fact that military presence and enforcement is inevitable. Multilateral states on the table. Because of that, common negotiations that we do that can do that. And when the mission to the U.S. destroy the global quad is we're like to say all the destruction, but the capability. War operations and effective force. We were religious bankrupt at the architecture of the post-war world. Not designing institutions. Power, market power. The last argument I'm extending is the Afghanistan turn illegality. It's causing them to grow even do status quo because they see this as high levels of profitability rather than going to militaries, which is exactly what stops them from allying the terrorism and the Taliban. What they are going for more evidence. Ethiopian already goes to the Arrow, let me have one land. That's internal like arguments that the government is able to resolve that we had internal link term. They also conceded to the evidence indicates that there is a growing form of instability because of this money, which means these was sufficient to solve the advantage and should not be able to generate any escalation like yesterday conclude that we are right and only 175 mostly counts the Afghanistan is also measuring against the core of the standard limitations to prevent world picture nations and accident in Afghanistan and South China future the life expectancy has increased the mortality more important is the government's money no longer only the government has the rational nature. Shows that well, 20% of this tower. Sorry, we'll take 1 second. After that, we'll go
hits indicators ability because life expectancy has increased, mortality has declined, and Afghans have access to health care. Drug money goes to terrorists, which foster instability. What the hell does life expectancy increasing foster instability when the corrupt government?
The UN indicates that when you see those...
Show me the evidence that the United government is not corrupt and funneling money to terrorist organizations. That evidence is not about the Afghani government, so I'm asking...
It is about Afghan government. It says the way that international governments measure those things are by things like what they do about healthcare, what mortality rate is, how many is what holds you you have no
so you're telling me because the Afghan has increased supply of healthcare to its citizens,
it shows that it is
that establishes it's not corrupt and gives no money to terrorist organizations.
No,
Now,
it goes in and out, and it is all going to help
no, that's
other
fine.
social services.
The link right? It's
Yeah.
about the squo opium fosters money. What evidence have you read it? Cannabis, within Afghanistan, not
Two arguments. First
foster
one,
money?
two arguments.
External to the crowd argument.
Well, the argument is that when it goes from the individual legal market, the argument is in the
grows the
process and
cannabis.
throughout the 1AC, you've made the argument that you still over the broader prohibition.
Who is profiting from legal cannabis?
From legal cannabis?
Yeah, you said it's not the farmers, so who
Yeah, it's
who do you
probably
think it is?
by the farm industries, which is not the people.
And which card establishes this?
I think that card is
There's a card about weed in this debate. Let's
There's
just be
one card
very
we want
clear
to see,
about
and it is
that.
very good. I don't know what you mean. It's only one.
That indicates housing price. One card is from the beginning of this month, the other two are from last year. So which card do you think speaks to housing prices? Because our evidence indicates that collapse in the economy and outweighs GDP.
The Shunner 3.3 evidence indicates that there is new investment that is going into all sectors of the economy. Banks are thinking that they are going to
That's
start going
not
into
even what my
housing.
question was. At the link level, which piece of evidence do you think you've had that Canada not effectively profit from hemp? Well, term that you kind of blew off.
No,
What piece of evidence have you read that hemp would not build an economy for Canada?
The card that you have read, like, Canada would like it if you make it's this, because they would be able to work together. Our evidence indicates if you cut off the portion of marijuana from their economy.
Established Canadians are ready for a piece of the action from the U.S. hemp industry. We're happy to give you answers. Cross-border operation could jumpstart the industry. What piece of evidence have you read that would not develop an economic industry
also
for
going to be in the
Canada?
line because the counterplan resolves all the arguments because it means that they can still profit off of those things because it doesn't have to be in the United States.
I'm sending it. On the thread. Is that a thing? I think so. Yes, that should be it. Okay, I think everyone should have been on this thread, but let me know if I messed something up. Gosh, you're so tall. It'll be the TPADA, the counter plan, and then the
You did just ADP inspect and then the industry.
I wish it was 60. I'm so sorry. It's really not. You and I have the same dream. Everybody good?
TPA conceivably no TPP is not the PC result in all the current conditionality is good conditional strategic thinker. So for defending all sides and forces that you will be large and taking the risk of more. To change strategy quickly means we conditionally specifically for this topic depends on what possible when the debate was negative it's difficult to quantify the worst the actually able to signal with that they do it three times to reading all top categories of reasons why strat has the worst the actually able to signal with an actively counter interpret it to make sense your argument they have to be predictable basis always love make conditionality doesn't solve because the links just have police have implementation of solve or us because it doesn't first conditional thinking simple reserve the solvency deficit the modeling and weed is different because they have no evidence to substantiate the difference between affirmative and the counterplan in terms of its signal to other countries obviously makes it so there's a ban there, and will that be confusing and probably means to be the online argument isn't about the counterplan, it's about eco, which we're not, there's also an impact on the subsidies of the perm, do the counter, they make permutation, it's not changing, law regulates the manufacturer, the necessary for full legalization, the permutation, severs the lack of the stasis, it's impossible to build a coherent, that's the Columbians, and the second, the CSA regulates 5 distinct acts of manufacture, possession, use, importation, distribution of the counterplan, for one action, manufacturing creates a very narrow exception for the other. Importation of permutation clearly over 20% of the federal state water regulations. Maryland court listed a schedule under the CSA regulates the manufacture, possession, importation, distribution, direct and repulsive criminal the manufacture, distribution, sensation, possession of marijuana. Third is nearly all means all of one to possession. Both of these scenarios being key because neither are. Sorry about that. There's no cyber attacks for 2013. The U.S. Federal needed to reach Russian chat unlike launch attack. As threatened the vital interest of the attackers would be correctly tracked to the act listed. Prompt of response, we have the confidence in our ability to determine your state on attacking the cyberspace. About Cyber 9/11 or Cyber Piper Herbert cyber experts at the Lewis of the CSA asked for one of the leaders on the cyber threat is not going to be Pearl Harbor. Nobody is doing anything. Mark. There's no impact to the U.S. economy. Coordinated to prevent corruption is more research and they don't see an integration effort. Also, it's preserving the U.S. market for the result of talking.
Yeah, Afghanistan. Yeah, I hate this first.
I just think that'd be more useful. You know?
Tucker.
About 40 minutes.
You got enough?
420.
We're not in Minnesota.
Okay, Afghanistan. We're in the war on drugs, but just like go to Afghanistan instead. Industry. Counter. Again, I'm not ready. We're not gonna go for the OES evidence the Cuba is sufficient slow and there's no input to OES and the Afghan argument of political stability. It is a question of the terrorist funding drug or still funding the funding terrorist organization that doesn't resolve the stability argument that's talking about water and it doesn't resolve the question of the terrorist funding V another source of legal income, which even if there's a trade-off of the opioid for stability. The federal recognized industry must provide the people African needs for the legal from the whole mitigate civil church of the national corruption was the exit to challenge African ability to identify because grab the international agency of the kind of the pictures of the large amount of cash related financial people to invest on the government system of drug media of the Afghanistan dark countries of the what's the combined gates and jeopardy instability happening now are in the terrors will export to other regions such as Indo-Pac and Central Asia that cause the extinction and regional example 124 Obama and also withdrawal of the Afghan protest of the support of the state from the other become themselves of the Air Jaffer is the ones who control the this doing for the nation drawing the circulation now the introduction of US software innovation specific fund the mayor wants to there's not internally something that the mayor wants innovation critical to software super about because lots of things like identify the server ABR extinction ABR positive feature there's not okay. What? Oh, he also for scientific leadership except statistical legalization under my safety credibility because they're not doing anything which legalization critical to restore their credibility. Not impact over agriculture. There's not an internally given good work causes society indicates other countries will fight for the complaint. First of all, the solvency deficit but counterpoint does not allow the manufacturer which means that cannot suffer the cannot suffer farming industry will regulate all the phosphate and it helps them absence of watching for the push between the policy of legally for use of the personal employee pharmaceutical competition for the scientific evolution and with the pharmaceutical development has been water with the federal regulation like any for uniformity and there's not a legal certainty back reporting and more targeted on pharmacies and things like the back end review banks we're comfortable with the movement of the public canvas and the opening of the liability student relation and the investors starting to come aboard the improvement market watching the evaluation new innovation there specification kit software diseases and the US patent is critical to US contribution doesn't result question also doesn't result the FDA scientific credibility of FDA which is a US based law is also not a law on the books showing industry that's the one is a partial evidence because other countries not come forward there's uncertainty and the next administration could pursue strong enforcement which would that criminal social the permission to the counterplay is incompetitive plaintiff says utilize nearly all we need to dip in every aspect which never know which manufacturer they see the exception to the plane the rest of the plank of the could be added on because per feature just a combination per plane your evidence says a nearly all includes one exemption of the and manufacturer which counterplay is incompetitive the specification legalization is a regulation which we don't which in the counterplay could be a process with the implement, which are played with the not. It is kind of the Pixar voting issue infinitely regressive, which is unpredictable for the app to depend against a day live just about penniless, which we can never argue again, are so which Jack's strategy not having insolvency advocates for charges are obvious because there's no literature to answer the counterpoint should be read as the reason why debating about the details for the still guarantee after our often or reading the benefits of your repression with this means that we still get the odd and we still regulate the so the debate is also good, which means it's also good, which means that should be the free filter for reasons why not getting you get other such as the compatible or generic there are so many alt costs for marijuana cannabis for 2010. Also, those other factors such as the house market, oil, like the new factors such as the bottom market signals in inevitable Canada in countries like cost 15. Bottom market is someone all over the economy will find dollars and they build the market, they build the bit of the inflation, which is the bottom the dock form of the spread pressure increasing the dollar drives Canadian inflation, no manufacturing benefit, high goal, and Canada, the control of the relative which is going to inflation drop the Canada dollar has put the objective in the proportion of the worst of it happened with the Canada, the interest of the Canada not good. Production of the shrunk of those temperatures 50% where the Canadian economy is low in its real. Those that are operating with the overall the economy is all to say if Canada and will remain throughout the year as well. You can go to bed with the Canada or make was Canada one period we close the job picture to have another from the explain Canada which social relationship of the lingering but the doesn't and the choosing the research leading and kind of declining to those were maybe also the district now the link debate. Legalization already in churches which there's not a which means that is global evidence says that if the California votes legalize the only Canada to avoid taking massive economic would be to follow the plan calls the Canada to legalize there's a consecutive about the almost all the cost of military are evidencing because of playing a lot of trade access like Canadian market to US and that's cooperation that bolstered their industry which means even some of the experts boosting their economic sector is efficient and evidently you have to consider the US economy also allow for Canadian economy to do it. There's not a government government paying for a government paying there's not the incentive to succeed. You also see that there's not the some argument there's not a terminology which means that there's no moment which means that should be the term reasons matter.
6
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. Yeah. Sure, I do not want to. Okay, I'm with you. Do you, man?
model for just it doesn't say legal or illegal.
Yeah.
And I just like think like is actually like as a definitional there's very little support for depending on the same way that people approach by very little like means nothing and it doesn't modify ability, it modifies the act to like I just don't think there's any serious sense. Yeah, no, I mean that's not like there's just like a I'm missing one for D term like it's hard to represent I think yeah just like big ability that's exactly like here's a different model.
Which E doesn't extend between it's science leadership on the words. Here.
Drawing stuff is super cool. Yeah, it's just not Citizen of the World. Really exciting. I found out last night that I passed my custom experience exams and now I'm just graduated.
Did that to be before. Can we get water? Okay, can I have like 16 ounces of water at once and drink all of the bottle? He was really patient.
Not full time.
Is it just me or is it for really? I think like the critical mass bodies
There's like a tournament.
like it's unfortunate. Don't have enough people.
I think that would be
Never debated in it. Awesome. That's a first.
spectrum will be determined. I mean, like, I'm gonna be in DC no matter what.
Yes.
You could.
People.
I think you were doing that. Nope. Like.
Okay. Dissent? Counterplan? Industry? Afghanistan. What's up? Advantage use that. Everyone good?
No terminal impact defense in the 1AR makes it impossible for them to win this fight. They concede the Civil War necessarily draws in other countries, which means that they will inevitably get armies internal in terms of terrorism arguments that they are going for, and inevitably draws in countries like China and Russia, which means that extinction is fundamentally inevitable. It serves as a proxy for countries like Russia, China, and India to sell arms to that can go into invade the United States vis-a-vis that which creates a new Cold War stance and collapses hegemony. We have conceded the terminal impacts of this, which means that it would necessarily get to the Kingdom impact, which is able to check all wars. The third impact that I think they have conceded is the NATO one. I think that they specifically conceded the it's all of an evidence that I read in the 2NC that indicates that NATO multilateral framework and through military power, which is able to stop escalation of any conflict that has happened. But they collapsed when Quebec succeeds because it splits England and France makes them to fight, and both have birth from the alliance. I don't care how terrible this argument is. It is conceded throughout the debate, which is the reason that you should give us a high line on this, because it is the reason that I am going for it in the 200. They both concede that if NATO collapses, then Russia war is fundamentally inevitable because they will try to invade and take over Europe, which means that we have an external impact that they have conceded. Now the line by line uniqueness arguments, they have conceded the framing issue that you should view all the economy low arguments as the economy is only brick because it proves that they haven't reached a complete collapse. All of our evidence indicates that it is shaky but growing enough to prevent complete secession happening. Proves that we are only brick, but they are getting really close because our evidence from like 5 around like a month ago indicates that they are considering bringing it back. They're bringing it back up. The first word they have is housing. They have no evidence that indicates that this is a large enough sector of the economy to completely collapse. Our evidence indicates that banks are confident because they have seen a slow enough amount of growth, which is the reason that they think will continue. The oil evidence are answers on point and indicates that oil drops and just force shifts to other sectors of the economy like marijuana, which is the reason that illegal production is the thing that works. Currency manipulation is also fundamentally irrelevant because they can see it is a small portion of the GDP, so it is not relevant in the broader scheme of things, and they're still one of the strongest countries of the developed nations with the economy. The jobs arguments, they can see that we are fundamentally the backside. Our evidence indicates that 1 in 4 people in Canada are employed by marijuana vis-a-vis selling it to the United States, which means that if they get rid of it, then they would destroy the entire economy. That would increase unemployment by like 20%, which would be enough to cause the collapses and the impact that are talking about. None of their evidence substantiates the impact to their small declines in that fashion. Now, the template or name, that the counterplan are, sorry. They say the states like this is irrelevant. The counterplan says that it is illegal to grow, which is able to stop it. They can see there's still a CSA rule, which our evidence indicates would be able to stop it. But either way, our counterplan is able to solve this because it means that the investors would not be going there in the first place, which is all the solvency of safeguards that they have already. They say they have conceded cooperation. They have conceded our evidence that indicates that the only reason that all marijuana products would become grown in the United States because it is cheaper. We would use net protectionist policies to ensure that we are the ones who are growing the marijuana in the first place because it makes more profit. The counterplan is obviously able to solve this link for anyway because it would mean that we can still export the marijuana to get enough for them to do biotech innovation, and they don't have a word that says it's a large portion of the economy. They say
The secession stuff.
US to the economy, not true. Our evidence indicates A, that we have nothing to export to the world, but they have no weed, and B, that Canada is the one supplying the US with the needs, which is we have been curling for this with 2 cards that I think they've dropped. Secessionism arguments that it is possible to get 5 words today is historical grievances means that they are like Lusky and because they don't like the way that England and the Emmets right up and they have different languages. B's culture, they see themselves as fundamentally different in the way that they talk, eat, and drink. C is linguistic. They speak different languages, which is the reason they fundamentally do not care about each other. D is also percent of economy because they say that all Canadians or Quebecers are from different parts. Our evidence is the only one that ties people inside Canada, and E is they don't think that they are part of Canada in the larger sector because they don't see incorporation. The only reason they are staying is because of the economy. Our evidence is on fire and indicates that when it collapses, they are likely to try to succeed again because they will see that there is no benefit to being part of the union. They do not have an external war on which side, and our evidence is quite good, which is the reason you should call for and read it at the end of the debate. Now, the counterplan is able to resolve the entirety of the case. They have not answered all of the plaintiffs in conjunction and conceded the fact that almost their arguments are necessarily about why something like prohibition stance is bad. First argument, the first card that they read just indicates that if the states and federal government are doing different things, that would be bad. The counterplan obviously fails. There's they have no evidence that indicates that farmers are key to the type of cultivation practices that they are among that anyway, which is something that Canada would be able to solve them. Even if this is true, they consider there would be overregulation on the plant, which is able to take it out because it means that it would stop the farmers from growing productive methods because they would only want them to grow in economically cheap methods, which was the point of the 1 and C card that they never answered in the topicality flow. The second is that it creates legal certainty. They have conceded that we are able to resolve this because we mean that you can import from anywhere, which solves all of the pharmaceutical industry arguments because the pharmaceutical would just import the stuff that they need to do the tests on and then do the tests on it furthermore. Now, they have also conceded that Canada is able to solve this because they have a huge biotech industry which is able to test whatever they need to in the first place. Canada is able to solve disease because they have the most technological advancements. Now we are able to solve FDA credibility. They conceded this. The third plank of the counterplan indicates that we remove ballot initiatives, which means the FDA is at the same place as the FDA is at the same place as the states on all levels of legalization, which means that we are able to work together. The law hurts the industry arguments don't make much sense because they don't have an internal link piece of evidence that suggests this. But even if they do, they have no reason that the U.S. industry is key and not the Canadian, which just proves these shift arguments. Now the permutation of the counterplan is a voting issue for an issue. They think that you should do this through the CSA because it's the only thing that indicates that there are 5 prohibitions. We should be able to say that one of those 5 things is good because anything else means that it is impossible to class because we wouldn't be able to generate on any offense. They concede this is 20%, which means that they're not picking out of just a small portion, which they have no evidence to substantiate they can do because that has to be close to 100%. The counterplan would still leave largely illegal, which is the reason that permutation isn't able to resolve any of the links. I don't really understand what this argument is. Anyway, they say only one exception. This indicates like saying that people who are underage cannot smoke. Not the same thing as saying we do not legalize a category of marijuana. Anything else makes them a moving target because they would always be able to redefine. They concede that they didn't do it in the one, so you should not let them do it later. They would say infinitely aggressive. Our interpretation was that we were only allowed to pick out of the 5 categories that are that are in the CSA, which is the reason that he's able to solve it. You don't have to argue against yourself because you should just have an advantage for every single one of the categories. What's up? Not a reason to reject the team if they win these arguments. Just reject the argument. Solvency advocates is a relevant critical thing. Necessitates us being able to think on our feet. If they don't have a reason this isn't true, then they should lose. Reading it as a DA is not able to solve because we need to test and talk about the specific things, which is the point of climate evidence and why specific debate about marijuana is important.
I'm gonna grab my water.
What we're doing is utilize we need to think about marijuana for the perspective of plants.
industry, counterplan, DA, and if it helps at all, counterplan is bottom up, picks, perm, solvency. Anybody not ready? Didn't get to case with enough time to plan solve the pharmaceutical advantage only. U.S. marijuana development is key to solve because FDA regulations as well as the CSA provide any industry certainty. They're able to solve from two pieces of one area evidence indicates only standardized regulations are sufficient to solve the key to have certainty for the industry because investors will not get on board if any part of the CSA is legal. One AC piece of Cayman evidence magnifies this and says anything less than 100% legal is an uncertain basis to develop an industry upon. The piece of Firestone evidence in the one area indicates any remnants of the CSA on the books, which the counterplan explicitly leaves for production, which is the maintenance of our scenario, undermines anyone in the industry thinking it is a certain industry to be able to economically develop in, which means no one ever gets on board. We have two impacts of this versus the economy. Our piece of evidence indicates all U.S. exports as well as jobs and revenue are globally exported by the U.S. pharmaceutical industry. Decline goes nuclear. Things like Ukraine and the Middle East are all hotspots. They have also conceded this turns and solves the entirety of the DA. Our piece of evidence indicates the U.S. economy is critical to development of the Canada's economy. Even our thumpers of why the economy is down is because the stagnation of the U.S. dollar or policies, which means they do not have an external impact on the DA, but we do have an external non-war impact. That's the science diplomacy impact that is only developed in the U.S., which means Canada can't solve U.S. science diplomacy. Our piece of evidence indicates things like global climate change and environmental collapse, as well as proliferation of WMD that are asymmetric threats, are all resolved by science diplomacy, which are external to a war-based scenario, which is the only existential impact in this debate that is external to their NATO containment arguments, which is the reason why the dissent cannot turn this particular scenario. Now the agriculture scenario was also completely dropped, and all the certainty analysis equally applies to this scenario. It's about U.S. production, and only U.S. production is key to global food supply. Our piece of evidence indicates climate change and droughts are an impact magnifier for what would happen that causes global conflict and state failure. This is something that NATO or any of these other powers could never contain because it is intrastate, which means these global powers like multilateral forces could never contain this conflict happening because of state failure internationally that causes global spur, which obviously internally turns any type of secessionism modeling from the impact. Now the counterplan debate picks was obviously botched and got to within 5 seconds of the debate. I know none of you are comfortable with this, but this definitely means the counterplan goes away. They did not make an argument why they could kick the counterplan. Presumption flips affirmative. There's a reason why you should easily vote affirmative first. There's a reason why picks is bad. It's 2 EC skew, which is clearly not responded to because we have to debate ourselves. We cannot clearly articulate solvency deficits. This is particularly magnified by the no solvency advocate that articulates what this policy or conjunction of mechanisms of the counterplan or regulatory facets, which should, because of this vagueness, should easily justify permutation to the counterplan at worst for this argument, which means the counterplan is not competitive. The second argument, our piece of evidence indicates it undermines any type of topic education and creates a stale basis of infinitely regressive, penny-less counterplans that are impossible to debate, that causes argumentative responsibility, undermines the 2AC to be able to respond. The 2AC is the last place to be able to respond, solves the entirety of their offense. You could have read the Canada dissad or made any normal means pieces of evidence that articulate how legalization thinks should happen. The dissad equally tests the affirmative on how regulatory measures should happen. Now permutation do the counterplan. The 1AC says nearly all does not have to defend all of we have conceded your piece of nearly all evidence. Guess what their nearly all evidence sets standard for? It's 50%. I don't know what this 20% argument that they are making. They said nearly all only has to be 50% and includes one exception. We have accepted manufacturing as the basis of this piece of 1ACT evidence. It indicates legalization is a process, and the end result of that process is regulation, which regulation could resolve the entirety of the counterplan because the regulatory facet would check all of these crowd out arguments. Piece of 1A, our Bender evidence indicates nearly all allows exceptions, and legalization does not include the entirety of all legalization measures. That's a normal means policy for how that's articulated. The best piece of evidence is easily affirmative evidence, and the PICS debate means you should err affirmative on these questions because of the vague nature of the counterplan does not effectively test the affirmative. Now the solvency deficit, I did this largely on the case debate without any types of standardized regulations or production. You cannot solve any of the scenario. Canada obviously cannot solve U.S. science diplomacy or U.S. economy, so I have no clue how they get those impacts. Over-regulation was never clearly extended in the block. I have no clue what the impact of this. Our piece of fiat durable evidence as well. The farmers regulations indicate removed from the CSA is sufficient to build an industry for pharmaceutical industry. Does not cause over-regulation of the industry. Only the plan is something that creates legal certainty. The FDA plan cannot solve. You have made the FDA credible. You have not allowed the U.S. to develop clinical trials for weed that would solve medical diplomacy internationally because it's only cooperation of U.S. innovation, which is something the counterplan could never accomplish by picking out the production facet of the counterplan. Now the dissad, all of this impact stuff does not matter if they cannot win a tangible link. Yes, it does matter that this is pretty terrible impact analysis of how the link threshold gets from this impact. First, Canada's economy is massive massively low in the status quo. There's not a uniqueness, but also the link press because marijuana cannot overcome. These are all causes to the arguments. These are not breed claims. First, the 2AC evidence is from 4 days ago. It says household debt, household price, as well as lack of job creation and manufacturing devastates the consumer spending and employment prospects. Think about this. If it is true that Canada already has a marijuana industry and jobs are low now, I have no clue what the link threshold for lack of jobs from the U.S. crowding them out, as jobs are already low, which is the only link scenario they could possibly articulate. Your oil prices evidence is citing Harper, who is biased. We have red magnifier evidence for oil prices. The Quinn evidence is fewer jobs and slow exports means that Canadian bank has completely collapsed. The second is the bond market argument. The 5-year bond bank has below overweight side rate that destroys the investor confidence. Their evidence is also predictive. 3 is a weak currency. Canada already has lost their industrial base, which is shrinking. Now 4 is the Welcome slump evidence, which says that businesses cannot possibly expand because of global crisis as well that affects Canada. And 5 is Canada's economy will remain weak all year. It's predictive evidence rather than snapshots. Outflow says Canada's economy will remain low and opportunities are failing. Your Sure evidence says the economy grew faster, does not say it will be sustained. Your CBC evidence is from November, and your Parkinson evidence is also from November. We have the most recent evidence on this question. The U.S. link turns all of this argument from our pharmaceuticals because it's key to the Canadian economy. It's heavily dependent on the U.S. sector for manufacturing as well as industries. They have also dropped the one-year press that state legalization now is inevitable and thumps the entirety of the dissent. That's concession of reading of your evidence. Now the hemp argument is entirely conceded. It is a production in the U.S. argument, so I have no clue how the counterpoint solved it, and it's beneficial for the Canadian economy because our evidence indicates there is a trade deficit and a trade barrier because of the CSA, which does not allow cooperation on hemp. Hemp is sufficient to build an industry. They do not have a card on this.
Kevin will.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, it's all good. In your document.
was like left with not really understanding why your argument was true, and like I don't think the neg really persuaded me on it on anything overwhelmingly, but needed to win, and as a result I was left what I thought was a neg ballot. So I'll go through those with you. Perm, I think very good for this permutation. I think that you didn't argue it that well in this debate. I think you kind of agreed with their framing that legalization is kind of determined by the amount of activities you allow. And so it was then a question of whether legalizing production was an exception that was so large that it's larger than nearly all. I'm not sure that's the competition argument I would be coaching my debaters to go for. I think legalize is the better route. Talking about regulations, which is something that you hinted at throughout the debate, but I do not think was the 2AR. So I just had to decide, well, is this larger than the nearly all difference? I didn't think it was. Your argument was one exception. That exception is like very large. You had this moment where you were like, it's 50%. Their card seems pretty clear that contrasts 50 versus like close to 100. If I misread that, apologies. And then, so yeah, I thought that even though legalization is a process, the process of the counterplan is not one that results in legalization of nearly all, no matter how I read that. So then it was picks. I think that this was worth extending, but I just don't really think you had like a good arc. So it's like, it's not predictable. I don't know why. Hurts topic education. I don't really know why. I think the solvency advocate thing is what I would have focused on. I think if you just talked about solvency advocates for like 25 seconds, I probably would have voted on no counterplan because of that, but it was just kind of mentioned. And so against that, I have a very short answer, which is like, there's 5 things that we can counterplan out of. You should have defenses of them. That seems to answer your topic education and predictability argument, which is the ones that I think were really extended. So then, does the counterplan solve? I don't have, I think, a very good reason why it doesn't. So, there's this card that's like, we need to legalize 100%. They legalize 100% of everything you have an advantage about. I think that you need a reason why, if we don't legalize production, it creates uncertainty in other areas. Maybe you don't need that card. I think you need to make that argument. And you just kind of say in every speech, you need to legalize all, and I think that they legalize all, and everything that you have an advantage about, they kind of just keep saying this, and then you just keep saying you need to legalize all. And I think that if there was just 2AR argumentation on the way that these banks are going to make these decisions and how maybe there's, a cross-sector uncertainty, but I just think that you didn't really do the work to contextualize that card to what the counterplan actually was, which was 100% legalization. So then, but maybe it's not. Maybe I'll give you, there's a chance, so let's see how that chance then spills over into your actual impacts, which is what matters. Well, FDA, your card's about these ballot initiatives, they end them. Okay, well I don't think that uncertainty matter is there. Food, okay, it's about ag. Card just says we need to grow marijuana. The counterplan leads to marijuana being grown in Canada. I don't know what the impact of this uncertainty is if it's left. So I think the counterplan solves all the case, and I think that it's competitive. And I don't think you had enough to win picks for me. So then Canada, link direction, it's good. Uniqueness, pretty low, but they got internal link uniqueness to secessionism. Card that says marijuana is a firewall, good. State legalization inevitable. Card doesn't really support, not really that argument, and I think that it's not legal in the status quo, and you keep extending a really good card that says in the SWO all this uncertainty is going to hurt the industry and it's not really going to develop. So I think Canada has a firewall against secessionism, and that's an impact that is big enough to vote for. So that was my decision.
I can go. I emailed my thoughts, which is sort of what I normally do nowadays. I voted on picks. It's largely like a coverage thing. I just don't think in the 200 you have an arg that defends the CP, and I don't think it takes a lot. I really don't, and I think you've got all the elements there. Just putting it on the bottom is dangerous, and just sort of lack of coverage is dangerous. And unlike Kevin a little bit, I sort of thought that the AF arg about like no solvency advocate for this pick that sort of makes the rest of the debate just kind of tough for you. I think that like you run a risk of the DA, although I think it's pretty low. I think the DA is lowest at the uniqueness level. I think one thing that hurts you, although I think the AF could have done a better job, especially in the 2AR, is to use the 1NC internal link chain about why economic uncertainty causing Quebec secessionism to sort of push back against their like, it's a question of framing, collapse not coming now. So like you're just going like your F says any economic uncertainty in Canada causes Quebec secessionism, or 5 pieces of evidence from the end of March is sufficient to trigger that uncertainty, then I think the DA is like absolute zero. You didn't really take that next step, but regardless, I think their evidence is
Before you got here, sorry, with the solvency advocate stuff, that meant you rejected the counterplan and then moved on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a voting issue.
Just
Just
for
like
that.
AF versus DA, because they don't know what to say if it's a voting issue either. But I do think that the preponderance of EV is AF on the question of the health of the Canadian economy. I think that their EV is just newer and better as to. It might not be collapsing now, but it's got some struggles, and I don't really think that your evidence really speaks to those questions. You do have a card from 3.3 that's like pretty decent, but your like answer to oil prices card is terrible. It doesn't really say any reason why it's not true, and their EV is just like it causes a ricochet effect, it causes a ripple effect, and I just think that the direction of the Canadian econ is in a very negative direction, which I think does do pretty big damage to your DA, given that your internal link evidence does say economic uncertainty causes Quebec to do its secessionist thing. I also just kind of thought that the AF got a little bit more traction on the state legalization inevitable, or not inevitable, but like states are legalizing. And your evidence does say that the sort of continuation of state efforts and other uniqueness evidence you've read says that like states loosening their laws does pose a threat to Canadian wheat exports, and so the direction of sort of you, I think, further hampers the DA itself. And then I just think that like they've got the like hemp thingy. It's not like offense, obviously, but I mean I can see a world in which maybe the app facilitates cross-border hemp co-op with Canada as a way to maybe mitigate the impacts that the app would have on Canadian recreational exports, etc. But regardless, the uniqueness questions I think are super problematic for the DA and reduce the risk of the DA a lot. And you know, the only thing left to sort of reduce the risk of the industry advantage is the like spec means over-regulate arg. And I don't know. I think if you want this to be a thing, you kind of have to spend a little bit more time making it a thing. I don't think that the climate evidence itself makes the like over-regulation what happened claim. And so I think the better way to approach it is vagueness means no resolution of certainty for industry, which means you can't solve your advantage, right? If the industry doesn't know what the fuck, right, nearly all legalization of marijuana means, which your evidence seems to suggest that we can't know what it means because we had to spec these things, then I think that that's like a pretty strong solvency def or arg against the industry advantage. But that's not really what your arg is in this debate. Your arg in this debate is vagueness means over regs, and I don't really think your F says that. So big risk of AF advantage since the CP goes away. The AF advantage probably does access Canada in some way, shape, or fashion given the size of the U.S. economy, and the risk of the Canada econ DA pretty low given the struggles of the Canadian econ as well.
Can I ask two broad questions? Do you think on the permutation it would help if we had an argument that was like if they win this, we should still be able to weigh the advantage counterplans, like the FDA stopping ballot initiative thing?
Yeah, sure.
Does that make sense? And the second question is,
Although that's tricky in a world of like I guess you just be like those links don't. Like, you sort of defended the CP as one action, so I don't really know
okay,
how that can happen.
okay, that makes sense. And then the other question was, would it help, or like should we just throw into the 1NC counterclan tax the United States should not legalize marijuana to get out of state legalization?
Not really. I just think like you just need to have a card that's just like 4 states ain't a thing, especially when those 4 states are like 5% of the United States marijuana market.
Yep.
You know, I think that's it's really just like they just sort of made this argument in continual speeches, and my reading of her evidence made that get a little bit more traction than it otherwise would. And one good piece of evidence is just like not a thing, or just a little bit of pushback that's just like Alaska and Colorado and Washington are a small dip in the bucket. Right? If Cali were to legalize, sure there might be an effect, but like you ain't got no ev that Cali's going to legalize, and the other 46 states that do would be far different from what the SQO efforts might come to be.
That makes sense.
I think the bigger question is just like health of the Canadian economy. That's
Yeah,
where you're
no,
super
I'm with you.
big trouble.
Thank you.
But your DA wouldn't have been big enough that way if I got rid of it.
Okay.
Well, I kind of want to start where Hayes ended, but to foreshadow and not to kind of leave you dragging, I also voted on Hicks makes the counterpoint goes away, and then the broad strokes are pretty similar to what Hayes said, although I have a couple different things I want to add. But before I do that, I just kind of want to, as like a teacher, just be like, questions that you're posing right now in the post round are kind of not where the debate got away from you. It is true that state legalization was a bit of a problem, but the broad strokes of the strategy are in place for Kevin's decision. And if I had pivoted the other way on picks, I imagine it would have been the 3-0. If that makes sense. But I don't think state legalization is a crisis. I don't think that the independent plank of the counter plan is what you need to kind of focus on. Those are interesting questions, but I kind of think that there was something very basic here. And I'm going to spend most of my time talking about theory. So I thought about theory for a very long time, and I kind of want to say that factually there are two separate questions. One, does the affirmative have to defend illegal production, or would they be severing if they did not? And secondly, is that distinct from whether or not the neg gets to defend the rest of the stuff, all right? And I kind of think you were a lot better on category 1 than category 2. And they do, I think, potentially bleed together in some ways. I think there's some arguments embedded in the permutation that might take that next step and say, and because the affirmative has to defend this, debates should allow a strategy that kind of centers solely on that. And where I had a lot of pause was twofold. I think maybe I just mentally compartmentalized the perm debate as distinct from the picks debate more than Kevin may have. And logically, I did not think you had a very good reason why you got to defend the rest of the stuff. This is not a great argument for me. I think the 2AR's opening appeal that's like, this isn't a great panel for this, is sort of savvy and onto something. But as I saw it in the 2NR, there was really only an argument that the disads alone didn't service as a very strong check. There was none of the retort to like, is this fair? Would it create a bunch of really bad counter plans? They used the classic 1 penny example, which I think is a contestable example, but kind of not contested in this particular round. And then I thought the 2AR also correctly pointed out that I maybe shouldn't over-reward the lack of coverage in the 2NR. And I can think of some ways in which some of the things that were happening on the perm and sever debate, I could go on a fishing expedition. And there's a ballot, I think, to be written that, like, your cross-application from vagueness has themes that might substantively justify a pick. But I thought that that was mostly used to kind of not let them have a vague understanding of nearly all, which you won. I thought George Mason misread the 50%, 100% card. The perm severed, but in a wild twist of fate that is just an execution thing, you simultaneously won that the perm was illegitimate, but didn't do the legwork, in my opinion, to kind of get over the hump to justify the pick. At that point, I actually think I was maybe more neg than the rest of them. I mean, the one thing that I differ from them a little bit is I thought there was this negative framing that was kind of like the equivalent of issue-specific uniqueness on like a politics DA, which is like as bad as the econ is in Canada, and I think a fair read of all the evidence is that it's bad. They haven't seceded yet, and I actually thought you were pretty good at like, you know, let this all be brink evidence from now until the end of time. Now that only goes so far because some of their evidence is predictive, and I thought the thing that pushed it over the top for me was the future of state legalization, and the other thing that pushed it over the top for me was if the American economy were to fall as a component of the affirmative advantage, that wouldn't be very good for unrelated reasons for the Canadian economy. But as a general principle, I think that the problem is entirely about picks. I have some comments for Mason, but I'll kind of stop there and see if the decision makes sense.
I just have one more question. So 2NR, what I should have done, it sounds like, is theory on top, then the counter plan. Then
well, I mean, if things were different, they'd be different. I mean, I don't think it was absurd for you to, I mean, you roadmapped that you were going to go to the case as well. So there's larger allocation issues. Yeah. I don't think that if your pre-2NR vision was, I'm going to spend less than a minute on the sum total of the perm and picks, that was inadequate. What happened was you spend enough time, maybe even too much on the perm, and in my opinion, almost nothing on defending the concept of the negative gets to do some of the averages. So you could re-give this 2NR later today, and I don't really think the roadmap of where you did theory was the problem as much as it was just, I think you could maybe even do other parts of the entire debate, Canada, et cetera, with more efficiency. I mean, Canada is one of those dissets that I think you're probably not going to win if they win a big solvency deficit / in this case, advantage. And you're probably not going to lose if the counterplan solves a lot. Does that make sense? Like, it's not, their turn was, no one's talked about it, but I think they're on the wrong side of the link turn question in the context of the counterplan, et cetera. So, your eggs were in the solvency deficit CP, please don't go away back in my opinion.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
I think you missed the pivot on Canada of, and I think Emory could exploit this even more, of how much the Canadian economy would be energized if they were basically the only close producer. So I think your add-on kind of, in the broad strokes, yeah, we should remove as much as possible from the books, or like your add-ons like, the Canadians really want in on the American market, but the counterplan makes Canada in on the production side of the U.S. market. And I just think am I making sense or no? It's like their whole twist is to say American production is a trade-off with Canada. So your add-ons don't assume the rest of the counterplan, which I think is a little bit of a problem.
In light of that, is there a way to spin like an industry deficit in light of like the import stuff, or without having like imports failing
Well,
apart?
there are deficits to be had that a complete removal is good, but the one that you chose was a theme that aired next. So
What do you think that should a complete removal deficit should look like? That we didn't.
well, is there a reason why American industry
Yeah.
needs to do something other than what the add-on is talking about, which is basically to help service Canada's economy? So maybe there is something to like the general pharma sector could be in trouble. And I gave you, I would have given you something on that. You know what I mean? But the add-on is backwards relative to the counterplan. You could even you could even argue that it's okay if the Canadian economy is bad because counterplan versus plan resolves the weakness in the Canadian economy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because now, post the plan, the only seller which exists for the American market, arguably, is Canadian.
I
You know?
strongly agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
Does it- and
I
so-
like that.
Do you think like instead of the hemp stuff, if you went for like the modeling stuff, that would be like a better relation?
on Canada?
Yeah.
No, because I think they're going to win the Canadian pod's legal. You're talking like we caused Canada to legalize?
Yeah, because like their evidence, let me.
Haddow does have a line that's like, if we were to legalize Canada with two, that would solve the impact of econ collapse. Like as a source of offense against the DA, I don't really know how modeling gets you
There's
to
no
that.
argument that if the Canadian pot restrictions were more legal, it'd be better for Canada's economy. Unless you generate that card.
Okay.
So right now, as I understand it, the thing that changes the Canadian economy is who's producing the weed that gets sold to the American market. Does that make sense?
Because like they're.
So you maybe could, but you're going to need more pieces
Evidence,
than you
okay.
currently have. You know?
I think the best version of this argument is just like their framing is the econ can be super low, but it's not leading to secession, which means the threshold for total collapse is so goddamn low. And then you're like, they've legalized since you wrote this, which has increased their market. States are legalizing, which is increasing their market, and they don't have a very good answer to the U.S. is key to the Canadian econ, so that no matter how bad it gets in the marijuana world, we solve the U.S. econ, which is a life preserver.
Right.
That if it does get to the point of secessionism, you know, they have this NATO impact. Yeah, like we're gonna make sure that Canada doesn't split in half, and we have the strong economy that the app provides to make sure that occurs. And if you shift, I just thought that should have been the framing for every 2AR argument. And if you do that, I think the dissent is. I mean, I thought the dissent. I don't know whether the percent was like 20 or 15, but like the data would be like pennies.
Yeah, maybe the right way to envision this is if we want a solvency to the industry advantage, it saves the part of the U.S. economy that's much more meaningful to Canada's economy than just the weed market. Like,
U.S. pharma is more key to Canada's economy than Canadian.
or if U.S. pharma is key to the overall U.S. All right.